Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra, where it's the August 2020 meta report. We are at the time of recording this. There's about a week left until the new set comes out and Targon comes out. I was thinking to myself I wanted to get this video out before the new set release to, well, one, help people who are struggling with the last few days before the season resets to try and climb to whatever rank and whatever goal they have in the game. And because after the new set releases and Target releases, the meta is going to be completely in flux and it's going to be impossible to create a kind of meta report because there won't really be a meta because a lot of people will be just trying out a lot of stuff. One deck that might be popular on day 1 or day 2 of the new set might just completely disappear a week later. So I want to get this video out before the new set. A lot of stuff here to unpack. Since our last meta report, there have been quite a few changes in the meta for good reasons too. So let's get right into it. If you're new to the series and this is your first meta report of mine you're watching, the quick summary of this video is I'm going to give a basic tier list here, 1, 2, and 3 list of the current game and what I think of the current meta. I also like to give deck lists, quick how to plays, why I think certain decks are in certain tiers, what they're good against, what they're bad against, and so on and so forth. So with that said and done, let's get right into the tier list itself. As we can see here, quite a few decks are in the meta right now. Before you say it, and I know some of you are going to say it, and it is, streamer, why is this deck or that deck not on the tier list? That is because either I think the deck is just not popular on the ladder, or it's not good at all, even though some people might say it's good. An example I feel like right now would be Yasuo Swain. Yasuo Swain is a deck that's nowhere on this tier list because I just don't think it's good enough to even be in tier 3. It's just not that popular either, so it's hard to get a grasp on just how good it is in the current meta. I've played it a lot myself on my stream, and I honestly think it's worse than every single deck in tier 3. As for tier 1, if you've been playing this game, it's the usual suspects. You got Ashe Sejuani, great mid-game deck, just a pile of good stuff. Tempo Endure, they got the stuff coming down early, putting on pressure, and then killing you with a big Endure. And then I rounded it out with Swain Tf, just the combination of Leviathan and Swain, just so hard to beat. Great late game potential there. TF is just an all-around versatile champ. Blue card, red card, gold card, all great stuff. Usually blue cards, the cards you want. TF demands the removal spell, or else a leveled up TF by himself will just run away with the game. Over in tier 2, we kind of got like a lot of variety here. We got Banner Man, Misfortune Sejuani, TF Ezreal, Fizz TF, which is basically just elusives, and we got Deep. I'll say it right now, I am grouping traditional Deep with Maokai's and Nautilus, Shadow Isles, Bilgewater Deep. I'm grouping it together with the newer Turbo Deep, as it's called, which runs Twisted Fate over Maokai and runs Piltover and Zon over Shadow Isles. I'm grouping them together because I think they're about in the same tier list. About tier 2, both of them is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's what tier 2 is. In tier 3, I have a Nivea Rekindler in tier 3 because in my opinion, it's probably the best non-Ezreal control deck out there, and everyone likes to play control. And control always will have a home to try and bully out some decks. But it's really just not good right now. It's lost too much stuff in the latest patch notes. Got Thresh Lux as well. Probably the best Lux deck and the only Lux deck really in the meta right now. There's like Poros, but that's mostly a meme. Karma Ezreal, it's just that one deck that will not die no matter how many nerfs it eats. And then you got Discard Aggro. Discard Aggro was like the hot new deck for a while, and as more and more time went by and as more and more people went by, the conclusion sort of has become that it's playable but not that good. But as for aggro decks, it's probably the best aggro deck out there. Prankster Burn's kind of a thing, but in my opinion, Prankster Burn's a meme. You could argue Fizz TF is aggro as well, but I see it more as a tempo-y mid-range deck that's also elusive based. So as you can see, that's a tier list. A couple of decks might be missing here and there that some of you might think deserve to be on the tier list. I'd love to hear what decks you think should be on the tier list and your reasoning. Maybe you think Fiora Shen should be on this list. Maybe you think Sejuani Gangplank should be on the list, etc., etc. So first off, we go down in the order as seen on screen. First off, we'll start with Ashe Sejuani. Not much has really changed since Ashe Sejuani first reared its head around into this game. Still just a pile of good cards. Ashe and Sejuani just synergize so well together. Sejuani herself is just a great card. People have started to add Captain Farron's and less just stuff in the mid game, like less Reckonings even. Just using Captain Farron to go over the top of, well, the mirror as well. And I've even seen some people teching in Noxian Guillotine to try and break the mirror too, because Noxian Guillotine is a great card against this deck. So if you want to beat Ashe Sejuani, because you're seeing a lot of Ashe Sejuani, and you have access to Noxian Guillotine and you think it will help you, try out Noxian Guillotine. Deck is just so good, so just a well-oiled machine. No one card is really that like OP. Like you can point at one card and be like, yes, this is the card that is wrecking everything. If this card didn't exist, this deck would be trash. Ashe Sejuani doesn't have that. There's a number of cards that you could say are the problematic cards. Some people say Ashe is the problematic card. Some people say Trifarian Assessor. Some people say Avarosan Trapper, etc., etc. That just proves that like everything works well together. If you don't know how to play the deck, it's like your standard mid-range deck. Just curve out. Even if you miss out on curving, that's fine. You have Elixirs of Irons and Brittle Steels as nice cheap tricks. Around like turn 8, even like as early as turn 5 or 6 even, you play Ashe, level her up, get a huge swing in with a bunch of big beefy boys like the 1 mana 5/5 Yetis from the Trapper, and just win right then and there because, well, that's the whole plan, and it works really well. So yeah, if you like just mid-range and you're struggling to climb, Ashe Sejuani is a great deck. Quick games, fairly straightforward to play. I'm not saying it doesn't take any skill to play. There is some skill testing plays, but fairly easy to understand how it works. Try it out if you're struggling. Should be a good game. And it should be good games and easy climbing. Next up, though, we got Tempo Endure. Why is Tempo Endure here, you might say? Well, or why is it reared its ugly head around again after it got a nerf? Well, one, the nerfs really didn't do much to it. The Curse Keeper nerf was big, turning the Abomination, I believe, from a 4/4 to a 4/3. That was the biggest nerf, and that wasn't even a big nerf. Endure going up to 7 mana from 6 mana really didn't hurt the deck too much. Now, the current list I have up here is, I'd say, the most popular one. It runs Sejuani over Kalista. By running Sejuani, or sorry, did I say Kalista? I meant Elise. By running Sejuani over Elise, it kind of changes the deck from relying less on Endure, if that makes sense. It's not spamming as many bodies because you're not using something like Elise and Haunted Relics to grow the Endure. So instead, you're just getting a lot of damage in through powerful tempo on-curve plays. You know, like turn 1, like whatever one drop you want, like the Bark Beast or Omen Hawk, whatever. Turn 2, you have a number of plays of like Sentry or Curse Keeper, Butcher, or if you want for some reason the one of Iceveil Archer. And then turn 3, of course, is like Kalista as well, or for some reason Caretaker, who's also there to help level up Kalista, and a level up Kalista can just win games for himself. Turn 4 is kind of a weak turn, but that's fine. That's usually where you're going to be banking some spell mana, so you can threaten things like Glimpses, Feast, Furies, etc., etc. On-curve Collector, like Neverglade Collector, is always really annoying, helps get a little bit more chip damage in. Turn 6, on-curve Sejuani just is a lot more chip damage. Basically freezes and makes something vulnerable that's problematic and probably kills it. And then if your opponent's still alive through all that, you got the good old classic strategy of just a really big Dehu Endure into an Atrocity, and, well, usually that's enough. So yeah, it's a very, very strong deck. Normally a deck like this, if your opponent is able to stabilize against your board, Usually that would be game over, but because of Endure plus Atrocity, it's not. Even just Endure by itself being really, really big with Overwhelm can make it so your opponents just can't deal with it. Unless they're playing something like Vengeance or I don't even know, Ruinations. It's tough. But yeah, another, like I said about Ashe Sejuani, this is another good deck that if you're struggling to climb with, try this deck out. It's very powerful, fairly straightforward to play. Just like try to curve out, try to get your strongest plays. There is decision making. Don't get me wrong. It's like, do I want to do a Curse Keeper, Butcher this turn? Do I want to Blighted Caretaker to try to level up Kalista this turn? Do I want to bluff Fury of the North, etc., etc.? Do I want to play my Endure now, or do I want to wait until I have 13 mana to play Endure and hold up Atrocity at the same time? So there's a lot of meaningful decisions, but it's still in terms of knowing how to play the deck, it's a fairly easy to learn deck. So I would highly recommend it. There's a reason why a lot of the top 10 players of every single region on the ladder play this deck. It's just a great ladder deck. So next up, what do we have? I believe we have Swain Tf. Swain Tf, just a really, really good deck. Why is it so good? It doesn't really have any one matchup that's insanely busted. Like, there's no, like, 80% favored matchup. It's just good against everything. Like, and it doesn't have any bad matchup, really. It's like, to borrow some Magic terms, it's kind of like Jund in Magic. Jund, traditionally, is just a deck that doesn't really have any bad matchups, but it doesn't also have any great matchups. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some matchups where it's really good and some matchups that it's really bad against. For example, the previous deck, Tempo Endure, it's kind of bad against Tempo Endure. Some people have been taking out a Noxian Fervor or a Death's Hand or even one of each and putting in some Noxian Guillotines, like I was saying earlier with Ashe Sejuani. Because if they don't have Noxian Guillotine, they're going to kind of struggle against Endure. And it's a little tough. So try it out if you're running into a lot of Endure. Way to play this deck is fairly simple. Just fight for the board, try to get board presence, beat them down with just random stuff. Your opponent will try to fight back for the board too, and that's when you play Riptide Rex on turn 8. Clearing their board, hopefully, and just dominating the board and taking back control. And then if somehow they're still alive, you got the backup of Leviathan, which will draw a Swain, of course, and then you got the whole Leviathan-Swain combo of Leviathan doing his 3 damage, and then Swain being like, oh, I guess I'll just stun 3 of my opponent's stuff. And then you do a big swing in with all that, and that probably wins the game. Also helps, another reason why this deck is so good is Ravenous Flock. People were sleeping on this card for a while. People have finally realized, wait a minute, this card's really, really good. You got the combo of Arachnoid Sentry plus Ravenous Flock in the early game as just really, really good removal. And plus, Swain himself is more Ravenous Flocks if you have a Swain out. Great deck, really fun to play. I don't play it too much, but it is still one of my favorite decks to play. Go try it out if you if you want to play like a fun Riptide Rex deck, or if you want to play Swain in general. I highly recommend the deck. Very, very fun. Now, though, we're going to get out of Tier 1. Let's head into Tier 2. The deck quality is going to drop a little bit in terms of strength, but these are all solid decks. Every single deck on my tier list, I believe you could get to Masters with. The Tier 1 decks, Tier 2 decks, Tier 3 decks. All of them are Masters viable. Next up, though, I believe it's Bannerman. And we got Misfortune Quinn. Some people are calling this deck Scouts. You can call it Scouts, you can call it Bannerman. Some lists don't even run Bannerman itself. I wanted to list the Bannerman version because I think the Bannerman version is slightly better than the Scout version. There's not really much to say about this deck. It's your standard Bannerman list. It's like just curve out 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, and then either Bannerman or something else. Get a really big board, Bannerman up. Playing Quinn right now because of this extra scouting ability is nice, and she creates an extra body, which is really nice with Bannerman. I know some people like Garen, and other people like Lucian Misfortune to be more aggressive, and then they put in like a Lucian Senna package as well. Personally, I like this list the most. I know some people, and I like the idea of it, Some people realize that like Laurent Protege is kind of meh, and they have started to cut Laurent Protege for Petty Officer. It does make it it makes Bannerman less reliable, but I'd say it's still fine because 6 non-allegiance equivalent cards, however you want to say that, are fine. Like, you can run 6 non-Demacia cards and still hit Bannerman a good amount of the time. I don't know the exact math, but it's still high enough. But I just like Protege at the moment right now. I feel like Protege is just, especially if you buff him, he kills a lot of things that you want to kill. So I like Protege. So yeah, if you just want to play some Bannerman, go for it. It's strong right now. It's doing its thing. It's just playing Bannermans. It's building big boards. It's playing some rallies. It's playing some back-to-back. Some people like Riposte over back-to-back right now. There's positives and negatives. Some people like more Rangers Resolves. There's a lot of variation you can do here. But as for the units, a lot of the units are pretty much set in stone. For example, like Cythria, Fleet Feather, Bright Steel, and War Chefs. You kind of have to play those. They're just too good and they synergize too well with each other. So, next up, I believe we got Misfortune Sejuani. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Misfortune Sejuani. I'm not going to deny its power, though. It's really, really strong right now. Not right now, but it's still got its strength. Now, you might say, like, well, isn't this just worse Ashe Sejuani? You're not really wrong, in all honesty. I honestly do think Misfortune Sejuani is kind of just trying to do an impersonation of Ashe Sejuani, and it's doing worse. Now, the only reason you want to play Misfortune Sejuani is because you want to play Sejuani and Riptide Rex in the same deck. And there is reason to do that, but I really just don't think it's that good right now. It's a fairly simple deck. Again, if you haven't played this deck before or even seen someone play this deck, again, just curve out. Get a nab or two here or there to activate, like, Butchers or Merchants or whatever. Grifter's there to give you the warning shot and maybe steal a card for, or give you the warning shot for Rex. Lists have been cutting Pilfered Goods nowadays because it's just honestly a little too expensive at 3 mana, and it's a little too slow against a lot of the popular decks now. And by cutting Pilfered Goods, it lets them play more units. And specifically, it lets them play Razor Scale Hunter, which lets them give vulnerable, and it is a scout unit too, which is nice. So it lets them give vulnerable to something, get rid of something problematic. The scout's actually relevant too because of Misfortune's ability. So a solid deck, solidly in tier 1, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. Next up though, I got a deck that I really hate to play against, and that probably means it's fairly decent. We got TF Ezreal. I'll be honest with you, the only reason I really don't like playing against this deck is because of Ezreal. I hate Ezreal. Please nerf him, Rito. Probably the best Ezreal deck. There's other Ezreal decks out there like Spooky Ezreal, Swain Ezreal. That just didn't make the list. There's also Karma Ezreal that is on the list, but it's a tier lower. I do think TF Ezreal is the best Ezreal deck. Specifically because of how well Ezreal synergizes with a lot of the Bilgewater stuff, specifically Make It Rain and Riptide Rex. The issue with TF Ezreal, though, compared to like Ezreal Karma, is you actually have to do some damage to your opponent, unlike Ezreal Karma. You can't just ignore them and eventually try to kill them with a leveled up Ezreal, because you're just not going to be able to deal 20 in one turn with Ezreal. Just like you can in theory, but it's going to be tough. You'll want to use Ezreal to do like maybe 12-ish damage. So you want to get in like 8 points of damage somewhere. And that's not hard to do. Between Rex and Butchers and TF and Petty Officers, you'll get that chip damage in. So it's nice. The issue is there's just too many bad matchups for Ezreal out there. You got what? The deck we're going to look at next, which is Fizz TF. Tempo Endure is a bad matchup. Deep's a really bad matchup. So that kind of lowered TF Ezreal for me. I believe I used to actually have this deck on tier 1. It's just lost too many good matchups, and Ezreal himself is kind of like lacking right now. It's like the meta's just sped up a little bit too much, so you can't just sit back and hope to use Ezreal. So that's why I think like if you want to play TF, just pair him with Swain instead. So, yeah. Now, if you do want to play Ezreal, though, go crazy. Probably the best Ezreal deck you can play right now, in all honesty, but just not a... If you want to win the most games, just honestly not that good of a choice, really. Now, you could try to tech the deck. We are in a more mid-rangey meta. You can, like, run... I'd say you could, like, cut the salvages and maybe run more removal. You could, I'd say you can't cut the salvages. You could probably cut static shocks, maybe, and run more units for the mid-game. Like, you could run, Zonite Urchins and Pool Sharks. I know some people like those to try and level up TF himself. And that's always good if you level him up. But yeah, good deck, fun deck, but not as good as the tier 1 decks, but better than tier 3 decks. So, solid tier 2. Next up, though, like I was saying about this deck, another deck I really hate to play against whenever I see it. We got Fizz TF. Basically, this is just the current form of elusives. Very annoying. Why is this deck popular now? Well, the Golden Narwhal buff really was the big thing. That Golden Narwhal buff has actually made it into a scary thing, and I thought that card was still trash even after it got buffed. You might say, like, how do you play this deck, streamer? I don't really understand. Because, like, you don't have that many units, obviously. This is a very unit light, spell heavy list for elusives, as I'm calling it, even though there's only, like, what, 3, 4 if you include Fizz elusives in this deck. It really is kind of just a buff deck, similar to Swain. Did I say Swain? I meant Sejuani Teemo. You get the Starlit Seer out early on, try to protect it, don't waste too much protection on it. Starlit Seer just does his job, buffs some of the stuff, buffs a lot of elusives. You'll get a big Zap or a big Wave Rider, or even better, a big Fizz, or of course Golden Narwhal is a nice thing to hit too. And then you just win with elusives and just crush your opponent with elusives. I've definitely faced down like Wave Riders who are 8/8s just from their buffs. Even I've faced like Zaps who are like 6/6s from her getting buffs, and she would just kill me. Of course, you get the Fizzes who are just insanely big, and they're like 9/8s or something. Narwhal getting buffs makes it a little bit tough to deal with, even though it will have vulnerable. It's like, sure, it has vulnerable, but it's so big, you don't really have a unit that can kill it. And then plus, you got the nice Freljord suite of combat tricks between Brittle Steel, Elixir, and Fury to keep the elusives alive, to keep getting some nice chip damage in. And then there's a couple of Battle Furies too. Nice burst spell, goes really well with elusives for that extra little bit of damage in the very end. TF's in here mostly because TF's like just really good. Helps draw through the deck with blue card, clears up some annoying stuff with red card, maybe stun something really annoying with a gold card. And of course, he works pretty well on offense too. The fact that he has quick attack means you can threaten like Furies and other such things. He's an okay Battle Fury holder as well because of his quick attack. So very fun deck. Very viable to climb with. I believe an NA ladder, might be EU ladder, but one of the top 10 players in the NA or EU ladder actually is really high up on this deck, and he's playing this deck, and they might even be rank 1 right now. Very strong deck though. Now, it does have some bad matchups, but they're not too popular. How do you beat the deck? Well, you want to really mostly deal with Fizz and the elusive, so how do you do that? Ruinations, Avalanches, Boxes, Withering Whales, if they have no buffs, of course. Killing the Starlit Seer really quickly. Now, the problem with all that is that's kind of hard to do because Shadow Isle's control is kind of in the dumpster at the moment. So that's why this deck is allowed to shine right now. And plus, Bilgewater is sort of popular. And of course, if you don't know, you can actually use a spell with Fizz to counter a Make It Rain or something if it's targeting Fizz. That's really nice. So yeah, next up though, we got another deck. It's a deck I like to play every now and again. I just don't like to play the mirror. We got Deep. Now, I will say it again, as I said earlier, I'm listing this list but I also will admit I do think Turbo Deep is a viable option, and it's about on the same power level as this deck. It does have this list and Turbo Deep, and if you don't know what Turbo Deep, like I said earlier, replaces Maokai for Twisted Fate, replaces Shadow Isles for Piltover and Zon, so it gets things like Mystic Shot and so on and so forth, and Rummage, to try and get deep really quickly and maybe even level up a TF as well. I personally like the Maokai list better because I like having the backup plan of a leveled up Maokai, especially against some greedy, janky decks. Either one is fine. There's not much to talk about with Deep. It's pretty much the same deck as it's always been. A lot of people are playing Ruinations now because of the top of the meta. Ruination's just really good against basically the 3 tier 1 decks that I have listed. It's really good against Ashe Sejuani, decent against Endure, pretty good against Swain Tf. Just good right now. Deep, in my opinion, has been able to rise up to tier 2, and I know even some people would argue it's tier 1. It's been able to do this and rise up to prominence purely because of the Ionia nerfs. Will of Ionia being gone has made Deep so good. You no longer have to fear a Nautilus getting bounced back to your hand and pretty much just wasting your turn. And Shadow Assassin pretty much being a dead card now, it means your Abyssal Eyes have a much better time at actually connecting on curve with your opponent's Nexus, so you can get a card. So yeah, good match against a lot of stuff. Its bad matchups there aren't too many bad matchups. Some people would. There's a lot of back and forth on whether Ashe Sejuani is a good matchup or a bad matchup. I want to say it's like slightly favored for Ashe Sejuani because they have things like Elixirs and Furies eventually. So, and the removal outside of Ruination is damage based, plus a lot of their stuff just doesn't, like a lot of the early game just doesn't really do much against Ashe Sejuani, and it takes a long time to get to that Nautilus leveled up to try and block things, and even then you're probably dealing with a leveled up Ashe. So I would say it's slightly favored for Ashe Sejuani, but not unwinnable. And they try to alleviate the unfavorability with the Ruination, of course. Some people are even playing 3 Ruinations, 3 Vengeances, which I think is a little too much. But still, Deep's really good now. Probably it's in the best spot it's ever been, in all honesty, because of Ionia, the death of Ionia, pretty much. So yeah, if you've been a fan of Deep, now's a great time to play it. And with that said and done, I think we're done with tier 2 and we're heading to tier 3 now. And we're starting with probably one of my favorite decks in the entire game right now, and that's Anivia Braum. This is my personal list, too. Anivia Braum, Anivia Rekindler, whatever you want to call it. It's not good right now. It's eaten a lot of nerfs, and the fact that the meta has shifted away from decks that Anivia Braum, Anivia Rekindler was favored against really doesn't help it. Losing things like Darius Harrowing, burn decks in general, elusives to a lesser extent, really hurt the deck. So people who do still play this deck, all like 5 of us, are trying our best to rework the deck and tune it to the current meta. I like the current list I'm sitting at right now. I played it a lot on ladder the past couple of days. I'm still unsure about Avalanche versus Box. I always go back and forth on it. Some metas I like the Box, some metas I like Avalanche. Also not sure about Fury. I think in this current meta, Fury's good because we're in a mid-range meta and Fury just lets Braum actually kill stuff. Now, you might say, like, what has happened that has made this deck fall from a arguable tier 1 deck to a not even tier 2, but barely even tier 3 deck? I really do think it's the Braum nerf. Besides the whole meta shift itself, I really think Braum losing that 1 power really hurt him too much. One of the popular decks right now is Trifarian Glory Seeker, Ashe Sejuani, which runs Trifarian Glory Seeker. Trifarian Glory Seeker is so good against Braum. She just lines up so well against Braum. She kills Braum cleanly, and he doesn't even get his Mighty Poro. Not to mention the triple Culling Strike against Braum. That also doesn't help. And then, of course, the Anivia nerf, bringing her egg from a 0-2 to a 0-1 doesn't help out either. So yeah, a little rough overall everywhere. Deck is still powerful. If you want to play control that doesn't play Ezreal, I'd say this is probably the best deck to play. I'm currently playing one Spectral Matron over the third Harrowing because I realized that when I was playing triple Harrowing, I would sometimes, especially in the super late game where I would have to play all three Harrowings, I would sometimes Harrowing and I would bring back 6 Rekindlers instead of bringing back any Anivias. That's not good. So I'm playing Spectral Matron both as a way to kind of offset that situation from happening, and while the card's not popular, it's kind of nice to have a Spectral Matron, which is kind of like a mini Harrowing that can't get hit by Deny, because every now and again you have the people who still believe in Ionia playing Karma Ezreal, Swain Yasuo, and they're playing like 2 to 3 Denies, and you don't want to play your Harrowing into an obvious Deny. Still though, if you don't know this deck, it's fairly easy deck. Just spam the board with lots of Anivias through Rekindlers, the Chronicler, that's a 1-up that I'm playing over the third Tavern Keeper, Matrons, Harrowings, etc., and then you just win the game with a lot of Anivias. Pretty easy. Next up, we got a deck that I have as tier 3. I'll be honest with you, I'm probably underrating this deck. It probably is at least tier 2. I know some people really highly rate this deck and say it's tier 1. I don't think it's tier 1 at all, but I do think it's only tier 3, but I could see it. I could see myself being convinced it's tier 2. The deck itself, Thresh Lux, it's a pretty decent deck, I think. It's got its just standard suite of good Demacia cards, specifically Radiant Guardian, Combat, Single Combat, and Concerted Strike, really nice. You got the classic Remembrance on 3 if you want to just pass on turn 1 and 2 to get something really big on turn 3. Uses up all your spell mana, but whatever. Really nice. You also got the cheese win of trying to unyielding a spirit up a Radiant Guardian or a Lux. And if they can't remove that through like Riptide or Will of Ionia or Obliterate of some kind like Devourer, then you'll probably just win from there. People have been trying Blinding Assault now because it's really nice. You can use Blinding Assault on turn 5 to basically scout attack and challenge something and have Valor die, and then bring in Radiant Guardian and attack it with Radiant Guardian. Very cute. Some people have gone so far as to say Blinding Assault is the Demacia Mystic Shot. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think Blinding Assault is pretty nice. I still probably underrated in my honest opinion, but I like it. Fun deck to play. For a long time, I was not a fan of Vanguard Sergeant until I started trying out Vanguard Sergeant. I played the 3-mana Mage Seekers instead in my version. After trying out the Vanguard Sergeant on stream before I was making this video as part of research for this video, I've decided I like the Vanguard Sergeant because, one, the obvious one is it's another spell for Lux. Like the Mage Seeker, it's a 3-mana 3/3. It helps just clog up the board, slow the game down. But also, for Demacia, the spell, the 6-mana spell, it's sort of a pseudo heal too for your units. It will kind of heal up the Radiant Guardians, the Threshes, the Lux, and just gum up the board and just flood the board and let you get more beams and just win with random beams and stuff. So, very fun deck. If you want to play some Rekindler shenanigans, this is a good deck. If you like beams, this is probably the best Lux deck to beam people down with. Very fun deck. I love playing it. It's kind of bad against a lot of the more top tier decks, but it's also decent against some of them. But again, it's like a little clunky in my opinion. But I like the deck. Try it out. You'll probably enjoy it, especially if you like Lux. It's probably the best Lux deck out there right now. Next up though, we got Karma Ezreal. As I said earlier, it's the deck that will not die. It eats nerfs all day and just does not die. Looking at the list that I provided here, how many of these cards have been nerfed? Karma's been nerfed. Chumpwump's been nerfed. What else? Deny's been nerfed. Deep Meditation's been nerfed. Will of Ionia has been nerfed. It's not on the list because it's bad now, but Shadow Assassin as well has been nerfed. That's 6 cards I can think of off the top of my head that have been nerfed that this deck either still plays or used to play, and I might even be missing a couple that I can't think of right now. It's crazy how resilient this deck is. Now, it's really bad for the meta because this meta is more of a mid-rangey meta, which just keeps pushing stuff on the board and pushing damage through onto the opponent and doing it harder and faster. I didn't mean it to sound so lewd. But it actually just like overwhelms Karma Ezreal, and they just can't stall long enough for the Karma Ezreal combo basically to come down and blast your opponent down from 20 or whatever life total they're at to 0. Still though, if you want to play combo and you're just a fan of Karma Ezreal and you know how to play the deck, especially it's a complex deck, it's still viable. Obviously, like all control and combo decks and just all decks in general, you gotta tune it for what you're seeing. Random one of Chempunk in my list. Could take it out, put in another Chump Womp, could take out the Yone for like another Steel Tempest, whatever. It just will not die. So have fun. If you are the person who likes this deck, I'll be honest with you, if you like Karma Ezreal, I probably don't like you because I hate Karma Ezreal. And I hate playing against it, but that's because I'm a control player, and this deck is basically meant to prey on the control players and make us sad. So, yeah, if you're for some reason seeing like a bunch of control, which really like just like dirtily control, like Karina's control, which isn't even on this tier list, and Nivea's, etc., etc. This is the deck to go with, but outside of that, probably don't play this. Like, it's kind of really, really bad against a lot of the popular meta right now. Next up, and I believe it's our last deck to talk about, we got Discard Aggro. It was once, when it first got all of its buffs, it was once the deck that everyone was high up on. Everyone was hyped about it, thought it was a new great thing. Turns out, it wasn't. It is viable for masters. There are some high rank masters who are very high up on it still and think everyone's just stupid and underrating this deck. I'll be honest with you, I feel like they're wrong. I have lost this deck, but I really just don't think this deck is too good. When it does do well, it does look unbeatable though, by getting like really big vision turns, flooding the board, playing an augmented experimenter to level up Jinx, getting some rockets and stuff, and just blasting your opponent with what are basically 1-mana decimates from the rockets. But that's all a little, I don't know what the right word I'm thinking of is, but maybe it's not consistent, I guess. Now there are various versions out there. Some people are trying out actual Whirling Death besides the versions from Draven himself. A lot of people are trying out Brothers Bond again, which for a long time was an insanely popular, really strong card, and people are trying it out again, and some people are having really good, really good success with it. Now, I don't think it's good, but I will say this though, if you want to play aggro, this is pretty much the only aggro deck out there. You could argue like maybe Fizz TF is aggressive, but I feel it's not really a traditional aggro deck. This is really the only aggro deck out there. After like the Darius harrowing death, basically, which some people still say it's viable. Burn nerfs too. This is the only aggro deck out there. Now, Prankster Burn exists, but that's mostly a meme in my opinion. And while this is the only aggro deck out there, it's still not even doing that good. It's just too inconsistent in my opinion. But when it does go off, it really looks powerful. I know some people are even trying out multiple experimenters. I think this card or this deck is just like 1 or 2 buffs or even a new card that we might get from Targon away from just being a super strong, dominating the meta kind of deck. In fact, we've seen this kind of deck dominate the meta before, months and months ago. Back when Experimenter could hit face. Now, if Experimenter could hit face again, or hit Nexus, if you will, it'd probably be good again. But this deck is just too inconsistent to actually be a solid tier 2 or even tier 1 deck. But who knows? Maybe in the future, we'll see the rise of discard aggro again. But like I said, you want to play aggro, this is pretty much the only viable good deck that isn't really a meme. So, you want to play it? Go for it if you want to play some aggro. And with that said and done, that's going to be it. I believe that is all the decks we have to talk about today. Thank you all for watching and listening to my meta report. I hope you all enjoyed the video and maybe learned something as well. Good luck for the rest of the season on whatever rank you're trying to accomplish. As I said earlier, Targon's coming out soon. Very hyped for it. So yeah, have fun, everyone. Do your best out there. And that's all I really have to say. Hope you all enjoyed the video. If there's anything you would like to see, please be sure to leave a comment down below. If there's any kind of like decks out there that I didn't talk about that you think should be on the tier list somewhere, I'd love to hear those lists and your reasoning for why they should be where you think they should be on the tier list. But again, that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed today's video about Runeterra. If you enjoyed the video, I would very much appreciate it if you could leave a like or a comment down below. If you guys want to keep up with the Runeterra content, please be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. And if you guys want to watch me play some Runeterra, I stream almost every day over on my Twitch account, twitch.tv/Zenaton. And with that all said and done, thank you all again for watching this video, and I hope to see you guys in the future. So, bye!